Welcome to Thursday's edition of COVID-19. In less than 2 years, the global number of infections has topped 200 million, and the world is currently fighting a resurgence that is largely led by a highly transmissible variant. Given this scenario, some experts are highlighting the importance of treatments to better tackle the virus amid cases of breakthrough infections as well. Now, we have more on this later on in the program. Here first are the pandemic updates with our Kwon So-ah. Now, so what's the latest here on the local front then?
Sunny, we're seeing a slight increase in infections compared to yesterday. 1,776 cases were reported as of 12 a.m. this Thursday, and that includes 1,717 domestic transmissions and 59 cases from abroad. And with that, Korea has a total of over 205,700 infections. And there's also a concern regarding those people in quarantine or under treatment, because there are currently 369 people that are under severe or critical condition. That's 40 more than the day before. Now, the average in daily cases now stands at around 1,500. And we've been seeing four-digit figures now for 30 days straight. And this Thursday, there's been a slight decrease in the capital Seoul with 466 infections, no change in Gyeonggi-do province, and two other places here with triple-digit figures, including Daegu, which is seeing resurgences. And with that, we can see that more and more cases are occurring in the non-capital regions. We had 692 cases of domestic transmissions that happened outside the greater Seoul area, and that is equivalent to 40.3%. Now, meanwhile, on the vaccination front, we've got now also close to 40% of the nation's population that has received at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. A health official today, meanwhile, renewed the government's pledge to get 70% of the nation's population vaccinated with at least one dose by September, but adding today that by late October or early November, most citizens will have received their second shot as well.
Right, so and on the international front, the global health body, for its part, has renewed its criticism of booster shots, I hear.
That's correct, Sunny. World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said it's unacceptable that countries that already use the majority of global vaccine supplies will use even more of those, and saying while most of the vulnerable people in the world remain unprotected. Here's more.
We need an urgent reversal from the majority of vaccines going to high-income countries to the majority going to low-income countries. Accordingly, WHO is calling for a moratorium on boosters until at least the end of September to enable at least 10% of the population of every country to be vaccinated.
The Director General, however, also acknowledged that he understands the countries that are trying to protect their citizens from the Delta variant through those booster shots. And variants also seem to be the reason for the hike in cases we're seeing here. Over 730,000 infections were reported globally in the past 24 hours as of noon Korea time. Now, for a closer look at some countries majorly hit, we are seeing some milestones here. Brazil has hit 20 million cases in total. And then we also see here Iran with over 4 million infections, while Mexico has surpassed Poland in total cases with 2.9 million infections. And those are the updates I have for now. I'll see you back after the government briefing. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for now. Right, come Friday, authorities here will make public their decision on social restrictions for the weeks ahead. For more on this, I have our Kim Sung-min here in the studio with me. Welcome, Sung-min.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right, so what can we expect from Friday's announcement, Sung-min?
Sunny, Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum said on Wednesday that given the current COVID-19 situation with the spread of Delta variant and a Delta Plus variant, the government will closely monitor the situation and decide whether to adjust the current restriction rules. On this Thursday morning, a senior health official said no significant changes are expected, but rather small adjustments will be made to shore up loopholes that have been identified over the past month. Meanwhile, questions were raised after the Prime Minister mentioned mentioned that the current ban on gathering of 3 or more people after 6 p.m. was taking a heavy toll on small business owners. Some took his comments as a suggestion to partially ease the ban, but the government later ruled out such a possibility. Let's take a listen.
The ban on gathering is an important part of our current social distancing rules. The Prime Minister was not implying that any changes be made here, but was rather saying the outbreak must be tamed quickly given its huge impact on businesses. We don't plan on making any changes to our restrictions on social gatherings.
So any changes that will be announced on Friday may likely be focused on reinforcing the current guidelines. Raising the social distancing level outside the capital region to the highest level 4 may also be on the cards given the growing number of infections nationwide. Currently, level 4 restrictions are being enforced in the Greater Seoul area, while most areas outside the capital are under level 3.
Right, Songmin. Meanwhile, I understand we're planning ahead for next year's vaccine supply.
Yes, Sunny, the government said it is close to sealing a deal for next year's supply of vaccines. Let's hear more from a health ministry official.
We're
in the process of finalizing the deal. It could number around 50 million doses, which is enough to hand out one shot to everyone in the country. The financing for this purchase has already been secured in the supplementary budget.
So that's 50 million doses in addition to the supplies that have been secured for this year. So far to date, the government has signed multiple contracts for the delivery of 193 million vaccines of 5 different types, namely AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, Janssen, and Novavax. The health official mentioned that the latest deal is for mRNA vaccines, which narrows it down to either Pfizer or Moderna. He said the quantity being negotiated is also enough to meet the demand for booster shots and vaccinations for minors, both of which may come at a later date. More details are set to be announced when the deal is signed.
Right, and speaking of vaccines, Songmin, I hear there have been some advances on the local vaccine development front.
Right, Korean pharmaceutical giant Celltrion announced on Wednesday that the company will develop a messenger RNA vaccine. The aim is to develop a vaccine platform that offers protection against a wide variety of COVID-19 variants. Celltrion said it had signed a contract manufacturing deal with US-based TriLink Biotechnologies for the production of its vaccines. The company added that it hopes to use its mRNA platform not only to produce COVID-19 vaccines, but to treat other diseases like cancer as well.
Celltrion, it's not the only Korean company that's dedicated to developing a COVID-19 vaccine, right?
Right, Sunny. Currently, a total of 7 local drug makers are now in the clinical trial phase for their COVID-19 vaccine candidates. SK Bioscience is currently awaiting the green light from the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety to begin phase 3 trials. But industry watchers say that it's unlikely that the vaccine will be commercialized within this year. There's also a local firm called Curatis that received approval on its plan to carry out phase 1 clinical trials for its mRNA vaccine.
I see. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. All right, Songmin, as always, thank you very much for the coverage.
Thank you.
Right, it's time now for the regular afternoon briefing on the COVID-19 situation here in Korea for this Thursday. As our Songmin mentioned earlier, tomorrow, that is Friday, authorities will share their decision on social restrictions beyond this coming Sunday. But up until then, a vast majority of the country faces level 3 restrictions. Now, under level 3, a maximum of 4 people can meet socially, with an exception for family members who reside together. Now, granted, the family will be required to provide proof of this living arrangement. Events including weddings and funerals, as well as rallies, can have up to 49 people in attendance. Also, concerts will be allowed only at certified venues. Indoor stadiums can host 20% of their capacity, while their outdoor counterparts face a 30% limit. Places of worship can host 20% of their capacity, and outdoor congregations can have up to 49 people. The briefing's about to start. We'll come back to you afterwards.
We will have a pan-government briefing today. First of all, here is Mr. Na Sung-un with the explanation.
코로나19 예방접종
Let us
사전
now
예약
begin
시스템
our briefing.
개선
And
상황에
first of
대해서
all, we have some improvements
말씀드리겠습니다.
made to our
시작하기에
COVID-19
앞서
vaccination
사전
system.
예약 시스템
And
이용 시
to begin
접속자가
with, we have
대량으로
seen
몰리면서
many of
접속
the
장애
connection
및
traffic,
오류로
which has led to
국민
crashes of the
여러분께
server
불편을
and has also
진심으로
created
송구하다는
to
말씀을
the
드립니다.
inconveniences of the
정부는
people. And I would
8월
like to
9일부터
apologize for this
시작되는
first.
사전
And starting from
예약부터는
the
국민
9th of
여러분께서
August, when we
보다
begin our
원활하게
reservations,
시스템을
we will
이용하도록
be
민과
enabling a smooth
역량을
connection for
총동원하여
the
철저하게
public, and
준비하기
we
위해
will also
전문 인력으로 구성된
have a
민간
joint
합동 TF를
TF team
구성하였으며
with the private
시스템
sector
개선에
as well.
역량을
And we are
집중하고
also
있습니다.
focusing our capacity
먼저
to
기존
increase
시스템의
the
문제점과
quality of the
이에 따른
server system that
주요
we have.
개선
First of
사항을
all, we will be
설명드리겠습니다.
explaining to you about the
예방접종
problems
사전
and the
예약을 위해
drawbacks of the
본인
current
인증이
system.
필수적이나
First of all, it is
해당
essential
기능이
to have your
질병관리청 시스템에
authorization of the personal
심각한
data.
부하를
However,
유발하였습니다.
this has led to
이에
a significant
본인 인증
crash
방법으로
on the system, and
간편
therefore
인증을
we
추가
will be having
도입하여
a streamlined
휴대폰 본인
system,
인증에
and you can
몰려있는
also
부하를 분산하고
you could also
본인 인증
have a
기능은
streamlined system
민간
of
클라우드로
authorizing yourself,
이관함으로써
and this system will be
질병관리청 시스템 접속이
moved to
원활하도록
the private
개선할
server, the
계획입니다.
cloud server, so that we will
또한
have a more
질병관리청 내에
enhanced
있는
traffic
예약
flow.
서버는
Moreover, on
대량
the
처리
KDCA
속도를 높일 수
website,
있도록
the server,
재배치하고
we will be
데이터베이스 효율화
reassembling them
작업도
so that we
마쳤습니다.
have a bigger data
이를
capacity,
통해
and
예약
we
처리
have
성능은
completed this process, and
시간당
therefore
30만 건에서
we believe
100만
that
건으로
this could treat
향상되었습니다.
about 1 million
오류
data
발생을 방지하기 위해
from about
민간 전문
30,000
검수팀을
from the
모의
past.
해킹을 통해
And we also
그간
have had
문제점으로
experts who
지적되었던
have carried
오해
out a
접속
mock hacking
또는
process,
보안 취약점을
and we have been
점검하였습니다.
looking at some drawbacks
시스템 개선
that were
외에도
related to security
접속 쏠림
areas,
및
and we
과부하를
also have
방지하기
some
위해 예약
areas
방법 및
of
절차를
reservations
일부
and
변경합니다.
processes that have
첫째,
been changed to
생년월일에
streamline the
따른
process.
직부제를
First, we
도입합니다.
will have the 10 days
주민등록번호에
designated
생년월일
for
끝자리를
each of the
기준으로
people,
하며
depending on the last
공정성을
digit
위해
of
접종
the
일시와
people's birth date.
의료기관별
And also, in order
예약
to
가능한 물량은
ensure
균등하게
the equity,
배분하겠습니다.
we will make sure that
사전 예약일은
these
8월 9일
doses and the
월요일부터
medical
18일
facilities are
수요일까지
distributed on an
해당
equal
날짜
basis.
끝자리와
And this means
생년월일
that
끝자리가
from the
일치하는 날이
9th,
됩니다.
you will be
대상 날짜에
able to connect onto
20시부터
the server
다음
from
날
8
18시까지
p.m.
예약이
until the 6 p.m. of next day
9일부터
on the designated
18일
days.
1차
And
본인
you could
예약
also
일자에
make your
여러
reservations,
사정으로
and
예약을
from
못
9th
하셨더라도
to 18th,
다시
if
8월
you have
19일부터
not been able to make the booking on the
9월
designated
17일까지
day,
한 달가량
you also
추가
have
예약의
another
기회도
month or
열려
so
있고
starting from
일정
19th
변경도
to
충분히
make your booking, and you could
가능한
also
점도
change
참고하시기
and
바랍니다.
modify the dates
둘째,
of reservations.
간편
And
인증 방식 도입
second,
등
we
본인 인증
have
수단을
also
다양화합니다.
streamlined the authentification
인증서를
process,
통한
and we
접속은
also have diversified
휴대폰
these
본인
processes.
인증보다
And first
접속
of all,
처리
we
속도가
believe
빠르며
that this will be
카카오,
faster
네이버,
than the
패스 앱을
mobile
통해
phone
미리 발급받아
system.
놓으면
And in
본인
Kakao
인증을
or
보다
Pass application, if
신속하게
you
진행할
download
수
these
있습니다.
authorities
인증
authentification
방식별로
first, we believe that this will also
안내하여
enable
더
more
빠르게
convenience,
이용 가능한
and this would
인증
also
방식을
speed up
본인이
the process
선택할 수
of your
있습니다.
vaccination
마지막으로
reservation. And
대리
lastly,
예약은 허용하지
as
않으며
for
본인
proxy
인증은 10분당
reservations, we will not
1회만
allow these,
가능해집니다.
and you could also
PC나 스마트폰 등
connect to
여러
these servers by
단말로
yourself. You
동시
could
접속할
also
경우 본인
do it
인증을
once, and if you
최초에
will
성공한 기기로만
connect to
예약이
the server
가능합니다.
via the
다만
PC and
해당
mobile phone at
기기가
the first time,
문제가
at the
발생할 수
simultaneous time,
있으므로
this would not
10분이
work.
지나면
And
다른
you
단말로도
will
접속이
also
가능합니다.
have to
또한
be able
예약
to
당사자가 아님에도
connect to the server
사전 예약
using
시스템에
other devices
접속하여
after 10
부하를
minutes
주는 경우가
from the
있었으나
first connection
다음
using
주
a
예약부터는
different
예약되기
device.
전에
And starting from
본인
next
인증부터 하여
week, you
더욱
will have to
원활하게
go through
접속이
the
가능할
personal
것으로
authentication
예상합니다.
process first, and we believe that this
대부분의
will
시스템
also
성능
have a
개선은
smooth
이미
connection
완료한
for many
상황입니다.
of the public.
실제로
Currently, we have
8월
completed the
3일부터
process
4일까지
of the looking
지자체
and finalizing the
자율접종
system,
사전 예약 시
and we have
적용해본
also
결과 이전보다
applied the
크게
system to
향상된
the
성능을
regional
보였습니다.
authorities, and we have
8월 3일의
also
경우
seen that we
평균
have elevated
5분 이후
the quality,
대기 없이
and
원활한
also we
접속이
believe
가능했고
that
1시간
people were
동안
able to
약
connect to the server
28만 명이 예약을
without waiting for
완료하였습니다.
over 5 minutes.
개선되는
And
시스템은
also in just 1
시간당
hour,
약
we
200만
have
명까지
enabled the
처리할
connection
수
to about
있습니다.
250,000 people.
시작되는
And starting from the 9th of
18세부터
August, we will be
49세까지 사전
beginning
예약은
the booking
만일
process for for the
200만 명이
Asian age group between 18 and 49, we believe that if about 2 million, a maximum of 2 million people connect to the server at the same time, we believe that the delay time will also be about 25 minutes. So we ask you to connect by dispersing the time, and we will also make necessary amendments if they are needed. And we also have other experts who will be explaining further. And we have Ms. Kim Eun-ju who will be explaining about these details. Starting from the 9th of August, the vaccine reservation system has been improved, and here are some procedures. In order to enable smooth transition of the services, you need to first have the personal authentication process. And in this process, you can also diversify the process not only by using your mobile phone, and you could also do so by streamlined process, including Kakao and Pass applications. So please take use of these streamlined processes. And when you are doing so, you need to at least get your authentication issued a day before your day of reservation. And if you do so, you could also have no difficulties or challenges in connecting to the server on the day of reservation. And also there could be some delays in the real-time data access. So we will have a traffic light system type system. So please check the color of these connection axes and also pick which access will be also easier. And when you are also trying to connect to the server using various devices, we will also halt any simultaneous connection for 10 minutes using multiple devices by one person. And our vaccination reservation will go on until the 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. next day. So please avoid the 8 p.m. time, and also try to connect to our server starting from 9 p.m. And when you are waiting for your turn, even though you have many people in advance, please wait. And because if you disconnect and reconnect again, we believe that this could cause more delays. And we will also provide some detailed pictures and infographics in order to provide details. And we have been providing cooperation with the private sector, those who are experts in the cloud, and we have been able to experience such cooperation on a voluntary basis from these private companies, and we ask for your understanding going forward.
다시 한번
And once again, I would like to mention some of the traffic or some crashes of the server that have led to some inconveniences. We would like to apologize to the public first regarding that. And starting from next week, we will make sure that we have a smooth traffic connection to our server. And so avoid connecting to our server at busy areas, busy hours, that is. And also, first of all, I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to the experts and also many central ministries as well for your cooperation. And as for the eligible recipients, please make your booking on the designated days. And if you have completed the reservation, please get your vaccination on the date of reservation. As we have increased vaccination rates, I am confident that we can overcome this current situation. And we will continue to exert our full efforts to enable safe and swift vaccination going forward.
네, 그럼 지금부터 기자님들 질문에 답변 드리는 시간 갖겠습니다.
Right, that was Thursday's afternoon briefing with officials placing quite a bit of focus on online vaccination appointment protocols. I have Kwon So-ah here with details on that, right, So-ah?
Right, Sunny. As you mentioned, this briefing that is, was focused on the vaccination reservation process, and that because in the near future we will have a vast portion of the population to make their reservations, and that involving those regular citizens aged 18 to 49. So the government has said it will do its efforts in preventing any congestions on those reservation websites, either mobile or on their PCs, and especially because there have been some technical glitches and also servers crashing due to many people trying to do their reservations at the same time. So some things that have been improved was that the government has went through to a mock hacking process, and also it said that while earlier some 300,000 people could make a reservation in an hour, that has been extended to 1 million people per hour. And also what's going to change beginning August 9th, when people make their reservations based on their digits of their birth dates, people can make their identification authentication a day before the actual reservation, and that can be done on their phone and also other platforms such as Naver, Kakao, or Pass. So the process will be simplified, and also the government stressed that people do not have to actually go onto those websites at 8 p.m. straight, because they can make the reservation until the next day. So let's hope that there will be a smoother process from now on.
Right, I'll keep my fingers crossed for that as well. All right, so thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Is going to accelerate the clinical testing of promising antiviral medicines that are already in various stages of development, including clinical trial.
COVID-19 infections are soaring at an unprecedented pace, with cases being reported in places that had earlier effectively contained the virus. Accordingly, some are now calling for advances in treatment efforts as the pandemic looks to become endemic. For more on this, I have Professor Chung Gi-seok from Hallyu University. Welcome back, Professor Chung.
Thank you.
And I also have Dr. Kim Seung-taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. Good to see you again, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Meanwhile, joining this session virtually is Professor Howard Lee at Seoul National University, who is currently over in the US. Pleasure to have you with us, Professor Lee.
Pleasure to be with you today, too.
Right, we'll start here in the studio. Professor Chung, let's begin with your thoughts on the need for a COVID-19 treatment.
Well, when you think about infectious disease treatment, there are two very important armament. One is a vaccine and the other is a therapeutic agent. Before that, we had to, the best way to avoid infectious diseases, keep away from that. So that's why we are doing, and we did social distancing, physical distancing, wearing masks and hand hygiene. Now the vaccine is developed, but we see that it is not very totally efficient because of breakthrough infection or some emergence of variants. So now we have to depend on some therapeutic agent. We already have some therapeutic agent like antibody treatment or remdesivir, which is another antiviral agent. But those two are IV, intravenous agent. That means it's very inconvenient for patient to use out clinic. So these days, there is good news from some companies that oral drugs like a proteinase inhibitor or a polymerase inhibitor, which can directly suppress the viral replication. And it's on phase 2 clinical trial, or someone is in phase clinical 3 trial. So now is the time for looking for a more efficient therapeutic agent along with the vaccine.
Of course. And Professor Lee, how do you respond to calls for a treatment amid the re-emergence of variants that look to evade our current vaccines?
Okay, developing a new vaccine every time a variant virus emerges is like going around in circles. Simply this kind of endless chasing the tail, it is not going to work. in a situation like the COVID-19 pandemic. On the other hand, with many in the world still unvaccinated, particularly in mid to low income countries, and the infection cases on the rise, it has become clear that we'll need something more than just shots to keep the virus at bay. Yet not many drugs are available against COVID-19 as of today. For example, the US FDA has approved only one drug, remdesivir, and granted additional 10 EUAs or emergency use authorization as a potential treatment for COVID-19. However, none of the 10 EUAs is truly antiviral. What makes the situation worse is the fact that the currently available treatments are only for severely ill patients requiring hospitalization and complicated settings with not so good effect. Therefore, the need to develop safe and effective COVID-19 therapeutics, particularly the ones that are conveniently administered, remains huge.
Right. Dr. Kim, as Professor Lee just mentioned, remdesivir, it's the widely used treatment option at the moment, available in some 50 nations. But I understand there is still some controversy surrounding its use. Could you tell us why?
That's right. Actually, there was the few global clinical trials on the remdesivir, and then the remdesivir was actually the first, most promising drug candidate earlier in the COVID-19 pandemic, because it was actually just demonstrated experimentally, both in the cell culture experiments and also in the animal experiments, at least for some MERS coronavirus infection. So it was considered as a very promising drug candidate early in the COVID-19. And then the reason is that the contrast report actually just came out from the US study and other studies conducted by WHO. And I think we have to consider a couple of things about this drug. As Professor Chung also said, this is an antiviral drug. But the COVID-19, this is of the viral, actually the infectious disease, but this disease has actually two different phases or just periods. The first period is like some viral replication phase. And then the second period is the inflammatory phase. So depending on which stages on the some COVID-19 patients are, we actually have to use two different drugs. So no single drug can cure all the COVID-19 patients. So for the remdesivir, in order for that to be very effective, we have to treat the patients in the earlier phase, which is some viral replication phase. But then this drug is actually developed as injection drugs. If it is oral drug, maybe it may just affect some differently, but this is the injection drug, so it is not really easy for us to use in the some early phases, so the patients with some mild cases. So the drug was approved for the patient in the severe COVID-19, but then in the later phase, we cannot expect a very good just the efficacy of the drugs for these the patients in the later phases. So this is kind of a caveat. And so when we actually just think about the drug candidate, we have to actually think about just efficacy, safety, and also about the way of administering those drugs, whether it is just the oral drugs or injection drugs or things like that. Then maybe just the availability for each different patients on each different stages of COVID-19 may just vary different.
I see. And against that backdrop, Dr. Kim, I understand by repurposing drugs, a research team that you're part of has identified a promising candidate compound for COVID-19 treatment. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, this is actually some the results from some earlier drug discovery, and so we actually still just wait for some further the experiments, including some animal experiments and also potentially some clinical trials. But then one of the main advantages of this research is that we could actually enhance the drug discovery program by just shortening just a list of drug candidates by doing some virtual screening. So for the virtual screening, it's just based on some computer work. So instead of doing some lab experiments, we are doing some computer simulation. So which potentially, we actually, well, in this case, we tested more than 6,000 some drug candidates or other some potential some compounds, and then we actually just tested all the different kind of interaction between those drugs and then just potential viral targets. So out of those screening, we actually just selected out some potential drug candidates, and then which were actually should be just verified by the wet experiments. So all those steps were done in this the sort of just research. And then one of the advantages is that we can actually just shorten the period of time for investigation. Also, maybe we can just save a lot of just drug-like just compounds by not just doing all those wet experiments. So that's one of the advancement in our investigation, and this can be easily just applied to some other potential future pandemics as well.
Right, so crucial time has been saved then through your platform.
Sure.
Meanwhile, Professor Jeong, how effective is Celltrion's Rekinora, that is, in treating variants such as Delta and Gamma?
Well, recently, Korean National Institute of Health laboratory showed that it is not effective in the laboratory work, like mixing virus with the antibody from Rekinora didn't work, less effective. But after that laboratory work, they did an animal study with mice, and they saw some effectiveness with Rekinora working in mice COVID-19. But the laboratory work, including animal study, is quite different from sometimes quite different from what's happening in human beings. So we'll see whether the Rekinora is really working in our body or not. While Rekinora to be a Korean product is a very proud thing, and throughout the world, the UK company GSK has developed another single monoclonal antibody therapy. So both product is a monoclonal antibody with a single targeting a single site. And another company in USA, Eli Lilly and Regeneron, combined with the Roche company in Switzerland, has developed a cocktail therapy, which can combine two different sites of spike protein. Let's say this is a spike protein. A single antibody can capture this one. And cocktail antibody with a dual antibody, again, can capture this one. So these two sites will be more strongly combined and can capture virus and down. So cocktail therapy theoretically has more effect than a single therapy. And there are some mixed results with different variants, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. But the thing is, as Dr. Kim mentioned, you have to administer antibody therapy in early phase. And it's not working in a very severe cases. So mild to moderate with a certain kind of underlying disease could be an indication. So if you have a very severe patient, then the antibody doesn't work. So each therapy has a limitation in COVID-19 treatment. So we'll see more potent anti-inflammatory agent after replication or after the antibody therapy.
Right. And Professor Lee, going back to what you were saying earlier, what are your thoughts then on efforts to develop COVID-19 treatments that allow for diverse delivery methods, such as oral drugs and nasal sprays?
At the time of the initial outbreak, everyone was frightened and terrified. So all the therapeutic communities heavily focused on developing ways to reduce mortality from COVID-19, mostly in severely ill patients admitted in the hospital. As I said earlier, however, this approach never took up. Now people are starting to realize there is an untapped area, probably of more, which is to help patients at all stages of the disease go through it in a milder and easier way. That includes symptomatic relief, reduction of hospitalization, and fast recovery. All of the EUA approved treatments against COVID-19 have to be taken parenterally In other words, via some source of injection. Of course, this type of administration is cumbersome and inconvenient, and in many cases, hospitalization is a must. This is why more and more COVID-19 drug developers are being redirected to treatments that can be taken orally or even nasally. They are much easier to administer. Without a doubt, only COVID-19 patients can be greatly benefited from those delivery systems.
Right, of course. Dr. Kim, have there been any further advances on the local treatment front following recognition of Celltrion's Reconora as Korea's first COVID-19 treatment?
There are some companies trying their phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials, and most of the drug candidates they are trying is actually the drugs that were actually already approved for other indications. This is called the drug repositioning study. So one of the advantages is that where the drug safety is well just approved, and the drug pharmacokinetics also well just documented. So once any antiviral efficacy in cell culture experiments or animal experiment, that can be actually just applied to directly to phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials. But so far, I know some companies actually they finished the phase 2 clinical trial, and they reported their result, not probably some or just the entire format, but some overall it's not really satisfying. But they said for some specific groups of patients, they claimed that the drug efficacy was pretty well just demonstrated. So that sort of just partially just effective the data. Some companies are actually trying the phase 3 clinical trials. But as I told you earlier, in this COVID-19 disease is a very it's a biphasic disease. So no single drug can treat all the patients of the COVID-19. So the best thing in some design of a clinical trial is that the specify which patient groups can get the most benefit out of such a drug candidate. So I think maybe just those companies are actually considering now such options. So they're trying to get the maximum effect of their drug candidate out of just phase 3 clinical trials.
I see. And Professor Chung, what are your prospects on a second homegrown treatment, and what needs to be done to facilitate such a process?
Well, as far as I know, there are maybe there isn't any candidate of totally new drug on the list. However, as Dr. Kim mentioned, there are at least 3 companies which are trying to repositioning or repurposing of those drugs. Actually, those drugs are treatment medicine for pancreatitis and even the killing a parasite and etc. And they are trying to get a very good result from any kind of clinical trial. We'll see. But if you think about totally new drug, it's a novel drug. It is called the investigational new drug. When you are trying to approve any kind of new drug, you need to find totally a new chemical, and that could be connected with the animal study and move to a phase 1 clinical trial, phase 2 clinical, and phase 3 clinical trial, even the post-marketing surveillance as well. So many companies in Korea, not for COVID-19, but for other diseases, has developed some kind of investigational new drug. They can find some candidate substances, and they can move on to phase 1 or phase 2. But the bottleneck is phase 3 clinical trial. If you like to cover a phase 3 clinical trial, you have to invest at least $100 million. So no company in Korea has free to invest that amount of money without any risk. So therefore, the most pharmaceutical companies who have developed a new drug has sell out the license on the stage of phase 1 or phase 2, or even on the candidate searching stage. That's the current status in Korea. But since we have quite sufficient economic power and also manpower, as you know, many medical students and doctors, along with bioscientists, are there. So it's now time to move on to biomedical science. So one day we'll have a totally new drug, but not this time, because you have to have government investment. As you know, the United States, almost all researches are supported by NIH. They have a huge amount of funds, and every researcher, scientists are applying for that. So Korea has not less R&D budget, but the problem is the distribution of that kind of R&D investment. So now the government should turn their head to investing on a biomedical science or a life science. Then one day we'll have a brand new, sophisticated new drug which can be propagated worldwide.
Right, hopefully. Professor Lee, keeping in mind what Professor Chung has just said, what can you share with us about treatment efforts over in the US then, specific treatment efforts?
Sure. Generally, it is much harder to develop antiviral agents than antibiotics that kill bacteria, partly because viruses do not have as many substructures as bacteria, against which antiviral agents can target. That said, however, we're watching a couple of new antivirals coming out, and I want to single out one of them, molnupiravir. It is a fake dysfunctional building block that the virus uses to copy itself, which in this case of COVID-19 is RNA. Molnupiravir is still under phase 3 clinical testing. But what makes this drug unique is that it can be taken orally in early COVID-19 test positive patients before they get sick or hospitalized. So the hope is if molnupiravir can turn out a Tamiflu for COVID, if it can, then it becomes a game changer. To reflect this hope, the US government has recently entered into a procurement agreement with Merck, the developer of molnupiravir, to supply 1 million courses, which is worth $1.3 billion US. If molnupiravir is granted EUA or gets approved by the US FDA.
I see. And Professor Chung, do remind us then again about the importance of having local treatment options despite the challenges involved, the challenges that you mentioned earlier.
Well, we have been a follower rather than a leader in this biomedical science. So I think now is the proper time to concentrate on this, because there are lots of viruses apart from coronavirus, which is a single-strand RNA, for instance, which could come into our country. When I was in charge of KD-CDC, I was quite worried about there are too many viruses around the world. The SARS-CoV is a totally new one, but apart from that, there are many RNA viruses in neighboring countries and in other parts of the world. For instance, West Nile encephalitis virus is transferred by a dove, for instance, also with a mosquito. And the Lassa fever, Ebola, and there are many viruses which we do not have a proper treatment agent yet. So whenever any kind of virus come into our country, we cannot wait for other countries to develop a proper agent. So this is a very good time for concentrate on the developing of particularly the therapeutic market in this Korea. So I insist on our government to invest in this field. And as I said, we have money and we have manpower. So there's no reason why we can't do that.
Right, hopefully we will in the future then. All right, Professor Chung, as always, thank you very much for your insights. Dr. Kim here in the studio, thank you for being with us today. And Professor Lee over in the US, thank you very much for your thoughts and your time.
Thank you.
Right, now equally as important as vaccines and social distancing are treatments for COVID-19. Having said that, let's keep our fingers crossed for advances on this front in the near future. Thank you for watching.